Hello guys, Bubba here with another tutorial. Today we're going to be going over buttons, and we're going to be using a little thing called metatables. You might not be familiar with metatables, but don't worry, they're not too hard. I'm not going to be going over anything super advanced, but as you'll see, metatables are enormously useful for doing certain things in Lua, such as object-oriented programming. And in general, it's just behaving modifying the behavior of tables. So let's go ahead and get started. I don't have an example set up, or rather I do, but I'm not going to show it to you guys because we're a little bit limited on time today. So let's go ahead, and to start, I'm going to create a button table. And this button table is not only going to contain all of our buttons, but it's also going to contain all of the functions necessary to create a new button, and it's going to contain the metatable, which I'm going to define as thus. And I'm going to give it a call metamethod, and that's going to require self. And then I'm also going to give it new index, which is going to be how we're going to go about adding new buttons. So it's going to take T, K, and V, and I'll go over these in just a sec. Alright, and then one more thing we'll need out here is the metatable for buttons, which will be button defaults. Just hang on a moment. Alright, perfect. So, what is a metatable? Well, a metatable is essentially a way of modifying the behavior of tables. So, with metatables, I can do anything from making a table perform as a function, which is what this call metamethod, as it's called, does. And when I run this as a function, what it's going to do is it's going to run this function here, and it's going to insert the button table into the self parameter. And the new index metamethod will define what happens upon inserting a new index into a table. So if I create a new index 1, it's going to call this, and it's going to insert the table that you're trying to insert into here is T, so that will be obviously button. And then under K, that's key, so that in this case it's 1. If I put this here, if I put tiger, key would be tiger, so on and so forth. And V is value. So anything that I put here, I could also, if I have this stuff, value would be stuff. So that's how that works. And for the button defaults, this is also going to be a metatable, which we're going to use under the the new index function, and it's going to have the metamethod index. Now, what the index metamethod does is it allows you to have values, automatically inserted values, which can be overridden. So for example, if I create a new table called T, and I need it to have the values X, Y, and Z, but I've only given it X and Y, what's going to happen is it's going to go up and look for this index metamethod, and if it's there, it's going to return X, Y, and Z if it's got those. And whenever you try to call that, so if I say t.x, it's going to first check if it's in this table here that you've created, and if it's not, then it's going to go up to your index metamethod and get it from there. So that's essentially how that works. So in the button default, let's go over that first. We're going to be keeping all of our button defaults, obviously. So what kind of button defaults do we have? Well, we've got a few things like coloration. So let's go our background color. That'll be orange, and our on-click color, so once I click on the button it'll turn blue, and our text color, and that'll be text, that'll be black. What else do we have? We are going to have the default height of a button, and I'm going to put that at 3. I'm going to have the default padding, or rather the amount of space on either side of the text for a button, and that's going to be 2. And I believe that's it. We'll come back to this if we need to add anything more. Alrighty, and before I forget, let me go out here, and we're just going to go ahead and set the metatable of the button. To the metatable that we've defined here. The button defaults metatable will be assigned during the new index call. So anyway, this call function is where we're going to render or draw all of the buttons. So we're going to leave that for last, actually, so that we know what kind of things we're going to be drawing here and what we've got to work with. So first off, let's make sure that they're giving us all of the necessary values. So first off, we want to make sure that the type of value is a table, and it will error with requires a table. Not type. And we will want to make sure that they give us an initial X, and we will want to make sure that they give us an initial Y as well. And we will want to make sure that they give us an actual text value. Alrighty, perfect. That is all we need to make sure that they have. Everything else can be done in here. So the first thing that we're going to need for a button is its width. So let's go ahead and give it a width. And its width is going to be the length of the text plus the length of, plus the padding value, so value.padding times 2. And this doesn't need to be in parentheses, but I'm going to do so anyway. And we need to set the metatable, before I forget, of the value here to our table, because remember we get the button table passed in as t. So button defaults. Alrighty. If you guys are confused at any point about metatables, I do plan on doing a little tutorial on them at some point in time. But in the meantime, you can go check out the Lua PIL, which I'll post a link to in the description, and it gives a pretty decent description of how they work. In fact, a really good description, but sometimes it can be a little bit complicated if you're not sure about programming lingo and such. But anyway, continuing on, we will need to be able to check if a button has been clicked, so that means a boundary table. So let's go ahead and have a local. We need value.bounds, and we're going to have an x1, y1, x2, and y2, because all buttons are squares, or rectangles at least. And x1 is going to be value.x, y1 is going to be value.y. So the upper left hand corner of the button and the bottom right hand corner is going to be the value.x plus the length of the button -1 so that it draws correctly. And you can take away that 1 and see what happens if you want. And the y2 is going to be value.y plus value.height -1. Alright, that's simple enough. We are going to actually now insert this into our button table. And let's give ourselves a table to actually put it into. So what we can call it buttons actually, and it's just a button. This is button.buttons, so maybe a bit repetitive, but that's okay. So anyway, let's put it into that table there. We can do so by saying rawset, and the reason I'm using rawset is because if I just insert this directly into the buttons table, it's actually going to call this new index metamethod, and if it calls the new index metamethod, we're going to end up looping in forever until it errors. So that's why we need to use rawset. So we're going to use rawset, and we're going to take actually it's t.buttons, and it's going to take the key and the value. Okay. Alrighty, I think that is all for that, the new index. And let's go up here to our call. So the call is going to handle the rendering of the button. So the first thing we're going to want to do is set our colors to the appropriate colors for the button. Now one thing we've got to keep in mind is that a button might have already been clicked. So if it is clicked, then we're going to want to use the color CL color. Otherwise, we're going to want to use the color background color. So let's just determine what color we're going to be using. And to do that, first we're going to need to loop over the entire buttons table. So for index button, or let's call it button, and self.buttons. There we go. Do. Now let's get our color. So local color equals, and it's going to be button dot is clicked, and let's add that up here real quick. Is clicked equals false by default, obviously. So if this is set to true, then we are going to say button dot color CL. Otherwise, use color background. So we're going to set the background color to that. And since text color is easier, we'll just do it directly and just button dot color text. Alright. Now we're going to want to loop over the Y values of the button so that we can draw it easily. We're going to draw the background of the button rather. And we're just going to use that boundary table, which is perfect for drawing. So we're going to start at button, and actually we could use the initial X that they give us. It's the same as X1, it's just shorter. And we'll go all the way to Y2. And excuse me, this is not going to be X, this is going to be Y. Alright. So, we're going to set the cursor position to our initial X, and we're going to go to the Y, and then we're going to write string.rep. So this is just going to repeat this string that we give it, this character, this number of times. So if I put 3, it would repeat a space 3 times. And we're going to do it for the width of the button. Alright, that's nice. Now let's go ahead and create our drawing our text. So one thing that you have to be aware of is whether or not the button will change text once you've clicked on it. So we're just going to check if it does have a change text, then we're going to draw that if it's selected. So let's just go ahead and make our text is button.select is clicked. I believe what I called it. Is that what I said? Yep. Is clicked, and button dot let's see, click text, I suppose we can call it, or it could also be button dot, otherwise it's going to be button dot text. Alright, and now we're going to set our cursor position to the middle of the button minus the length of the text, and we'll do so like this. Set the cursor position to the x1 position, or the initial x, and then we're going to add to that the width of the button divided by 2 minus the length of the text divided by 2. And actually not the length of the text, but rather the length of this text here that we've defined. Alright, and then we are going to set the y to button.y plus button.height divided by 2. Alright, then we're just going to write the text. And that should be it for the call. We'll want one more function here, and we'll put that outside of our metatable, and we'll call that let's see here, is clicking check click. Yeah, let's call it check click. Call it xy, and we need to make sure that it's called a function. Alright. This will also require the self parameter, that way we can get to these values. Now the reason that it needs the self parameter and I can't just, refer directly to the button table is because if you are defining a function inside of a table, that function actually doesn't know that the table exists yet, not until after the table's already been defined. So it's going to error when you try to run it. So that's why we need this self. And the way we could use that self parameter is we could say either button.checkClick and then insert button into it directly, or the easier way, just use a regular colon instead of a period and call it like this, and then you can insert the arguments just like so, and it automatically inserts button as a self, or the first parameter. So let's go ahead here, and we're going to use another for loop. Index button in pairs self.buttons, and we're going to check if our click x is larger than button.x and x is smaller than or equal to button.bounds.x2, and y is larger than or equal to button.y, and y is less than or equal to button.bounds.y2. Then we will set, not set the cursor position. We will first set the click value to true. So the button has been clicked. So we're going to make that true. And we're also going to check if it's got an onClick function. If button.onClick, we got to make sure it's got it first. Then go ahead and execute that function. Alright. And then we can just return the index. That way we can unhighlight the button with a timer or some such thing. And I believe that's it for inside of the button table. Let's go ahead and define ourselves a few buttons. So what? Let's just make this simple. We'll have button 1. Yeah, button 1. And now, even though I'm trying to insert it directly into the button table, our new index function is going to insert it into the button.buttons table instead of directly into the button table. So, pretty nice. Let's go ahead and create our x, y, and text. And x will be 1, y will be 1, text will be, this is a button. What did I call it? Did I call it change text? Click text, yep. Alright. Click text can be you just clicked me. And we're going to do this for a few more. Let's give it a custom let's give it a custom height this time. 5. Try to make it an odd number so that it centers correctly. And our click text clicked. And that should be enough to show it off for now. So let's go ahead and just call the button table. Because we have that call metamethod, we will be able to call it as if it were a function. Let's run it. And we'll get an attempt to call nil, because what would be a program with that having a few errors? Length of text, yep, should be, I believe, value.text. Just make sure I didn't do it again. I didn't. And attempt to call nil. Metatable. So yeah, I caught 2 errors there. So t.button. Yep, I think that's right. Let's try it again. Alright, perfect. Custom height, no custom height, and now all I've got to implement is a main while loop, not function, so that we can handle clicks. So let's pull our event as per usual, and if it is a mouse click, then otherwise, if it's a timer, because we're going to want to handle unselecting a button. And right here, we're going to first, of course, always got to draw buttons and set the background color to black first and clear the screen. And then we can draw the buttons. Okay, so if E1 is a mouse click, then we will want to check the click, and we're going to want to capture an index that is returned to us by our check click function, and that way we can reset it with a timer. So to keep track of a timer, we're going to need to do that out here. So let's have a timer, and our timer is actually going to be a table so that we can keep track of the index in there too. So let's just have our index and timer, and we'll set them to false at here, and then once it's clicked on something, set it to true. So timer.index equals index. Timer.timer, and we'll just go ahead and start the timer, which returns a timer ID. That way we can compare it here and make sure that it is the actual timer that was started here. So if it is, then we will all we have to do is say button.buttons. Let's see, timer.index dot, what is it? Is clicked equals false. And then we just set timer equal to a new table. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. Perfect. Exactly what we wanted. Alright, let's go ahead and give one of our buttons an onClick function so that it actually performs a function when you click it. Alright. And actually, because this clears the screen, I'm going to get rid of that clear screen because otherwise it's not going to show that I did something. So, and it overwrote it with this button too, so let me just change the area where it writes to real quick. Oh, I didn't even click it. There we go. Works just fine. And just to make things a little bit more cool, let's have our buttons 2 take an argument. The onClick take an argument, and that'll be our self parameter. So it's going to take a reference to this table here. And we'll change our check click function to insert that. And then we can actually just do, button on click. However you prefer, doesn't matter. And instead of just writing this, let's clear the screen. New button title, and then we can actually set our set our text to input. Now let's see what happens. And I don't know why I didn't clear the screen, but this is a test. And as you can see, it changed. So that is the gist of buttons. And this actually ended up being a pretty long tutorial, but it was about as short as I could condense it into when we're using metatables. But hopefully you guys will find metatables really useful. I know that I do, and I use them all the time for GUI. And buttons really aren't the best thing to use metatables for. They don't really require them or need them. I could make a perfectly good GUI button without using metatables at all. But I'm just going to teach them now when it's simpler stuff than as opposed to teaching them when I'm trying to get into some really more advanced things. Like I do plan on doing a sort of gaming GUI type of tutorial where I actually implement physics and such like that. Physics entities. Yeah, that will be where our metatables come in really handy. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you have any comments or if you have suggestions for my next tutorial, then please do so either in the comments below or on the forums, which I'll make a link to in the description. And I will catch you in the next tutorial.